Hi everyone, it's Daniela again with Community Library. Today I'm going to show you how to make this cute little market tote bag. So let's get started. Let's start by taking a look at what needs to be cut out. So I have my main fabric here, and this is cut into two pieces of 11 by 18. So this is the outside of the bag. Then I have an accent color that I'm going to use. This is going to be the inside of the bag as well as the trim that goes around the bag. So that is two pieces of 15 by 18. And then in that same fabric, this is going to be the handle. And this is two pieces of 5 by 28. So that's the fabric we're going to use, but we also need to cut interfacing for this project. And you can find this at Joann's, Walmart, Hobby Lobby. Everybody has it. Basically what this does is it sticks to one side of fabric and it just adds a little bit of stability to it. So we're going to use it on one layer just to kind of give the bag a little bit of stability. So I have two pieces of 10.5 by 17.5. I have two pieces of 2 by 17.5. And I have two pieces of 1 by 27.5. Okay, so you'll see in a few minutes how all of this comes together. And also, if you take a look at the email that I sent out, you'll have the supply list, so you'll know exactly what the measurements need to be if you missed that. Once we have everything cut out, we can start ironing our interfacing onto our fabric. So I'm starting with one of my pieces for the main part of the bag. This is an 11 by 18 piece, and I'm going to take one of the interfacings that measures 10.5 by 17.5. So the interface is just a tiny bit smaller than the fabric, and the reason for this is on one of the sides of the interface is the sticky glue side, and if the sticky glue side overlaps the fabric and you iron down on that, it's going to adhere right to your mat rather than to the fabric, and it's going to gunk up your iron and it gets icky. So make sure that your interfacing is just a tiny bit smaller, and in the instructions here, that's already been added in. So let me take my fabric here. I'm going to lay it out and just make sure, if you haven't already pressed it, go ahead and give it a nice press just to make sure everything is smooth and even, no wrinkles. And now I'm going to turn it over. I want the right side of my fabric facing down. Now I'm going to take my interface and take a look at your interface. Just take a minute to do this. You're going to see that one side is shiny and the other side is matte. So I want the shiny side down because that's what's going to stick to my fabric. And because this is a little bit smaller than the actual fabric, I can just kind of center it on my piece of fabric here, and I'm just eyeballing it. Really, all I want to make sure is that my interface is within the confines of the fabric. And then starting somewhere in the middle, I'm going to press down. And I'm just going to continue to press from the middle out until my interface is adhered to the fabric. And you can use a dry iron for this, and you might have to go over it a few times. For the interface that you buy, because there are different brands out there, look at the instructions on the brand that you have. They'll usually come with paperwork. So if you buy a piece that's, maybe you get a yard piece, they'll include the paper in that for you so that it's kind of rolled up with the interface. So that way you can see exactly what the manufacturer recommends for how long to press it and whether you need a wet or dry iron. And usually for this, it would be a dry iron. So I'm just pressing down, making sure. I don't want to really go too much side to side like when I iron, because I don't want this adjusting until it's all the way down. I want to make sure I'm just kind of pressing it like this. So I've got that done, and I already did the other piece. So now we're going to move on to the fabric for the inside and for the trim. So I'm going to take these two big pieces here. This is my 15 by 18, and this is my coordinating fabric that matches my handles. Again, I'm just going to do a quick little press here just to make sure. I have these folded so you can see a little bit of a line there. So we'll get those pressed out. And then I'm going to take the piece of 2 by 17 and a half interfacing. Again, I'm looking for the shiny side. I want the fabric right side down, and I want the shiny side down on my interfacing. And what I'm going to do, again, I'm kind of eyeballing it, and I'm just going to put the interface about a 1/4 inch down from the top of the fabric line. And again, this is just giving it a little bit extra stability. And I know this looks a little bit weird that I'm only putting it on this one portion, but once we get to the next few steps, you're going to see why that is. So again, I'm just going to start pressing down. And if at any point when you're moving around your pieces of fabric and turning things inside out, right side out, whatever it may be, you know, if you need to press this back down again because it starts coming apart a little bit, that's okay. It's not the end of the world. They stick pretty well, but nothing's perfect, right? Okay, so I'm going to continue and do that for my next piece of fabric as well. And then we're going to move on to the handles, and the handles are going to be a little bit different. For the handles, I'm going to take one piece of the 5 by 28, and I'm going to put it wrong side down on my ironing mat here. Then what I want to do is fold it in half lengthwise. So all along the length here, just fold it in half, match your raw edges, and then press down. And we're going to do that along the whole length of this piece. But we're not done yet. There's more to this. Okay, so once that's pressed down, what you can do now is open up your fabric, and you've got your nice crease line in here. I'm going to take one of the edges, and I'm going to put the raw edge along the crease line that I just pressed on. And then I'm going to iron this all the way across again, all the way to the end. And when I get to the end here, I'll show you what happens next. I think you've probably already guessed it. What I'm going to do is flip this around, and now I'm going to take this piece and do the same thing, just fold it up. So my two raw edges are essentially touching in the center here. And I will iron all of that, all the way down the whole form. Once I have it all ironed out, what I'm going to do is take the interfacing that's measured 1 by 27 and a half, and now I'm going to open up my form here and take a look where your center line is. You should still be able to see that center crease. I'm going to take the interfacing, shiny side down again, and I'm going to place it inside that crease. So what's happening here is it's going to be touching, the raw edge of the interfacing is going to be touching the center line on the fabric. And then just like with the other two, we're just going to go ahead and press it down the whole length through. And what we'll be doing in the end is folding this end over and then folding it over one more time, and this is going to be our handle that we're going to sew together in a few minutes. All right, now for the fun part, we're going to start sewing. So I'm going to start with my two main fabric pieces, the outside of my bag, and I want to take this and turn it right sides together. And if you have a directional fabric like I do, so for example, I have these pumpkins, I want to make sure they're both facing the same direction. And hopefully when we're done with the bag, they're actually facing up rather than upside down. And I'm going to put all my edges together here. And I'm going to sew around the perimeter, but not all the way around. I'm just doing 3 sides. So I want to do the 2 sides and the bottom. I'm leaving the top open. And I'm just going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, just like normal, and go through all the way. And if you need to pin this, if it makes it easier for you, then by all means go ahead and do that. And what I want to do, we've done this before, we're going to stop about a 1/4 inch from the edge of the fabric. Make sure your needle's in the down position. I'm going to pull up my presser foot and I'm going to pivot my fabric and drop my presser foot again. So this way I don't have to start and stop as many times, and I can just continue with my line. And I'm going to do that all the way around and leave the top open. I've stitched all the way around my sides and my bottom. So now what I'm going to do is go ahead and turn this right side out. And the paper will get a little bit wrinkled, the interface, no big deal. It's okay. You don't have to worry about being too gentle with it. Okay, so right now, it looks like it's going to be kind of a short bag, but you're going to see once we get the other part on, because there's going to be a trim piece up here, it'll actually be a little bit bigger than this. So it's actually a good size bag. So just turn this right sides out and then put that to the side. And okay, so now just like we did with the outer portion of the bag, we're going to put together the inner portion. So again, I want my right sides together. And with this one, you have to make sure that you have the interface that you had ironed on at the top. So both of these interface pieces have to be at the top. And then we're just going to put these together, and this is almost like the outside of the bag. The only difference is going to be you're going to leave the top open, that's the same, but you're going to stitch down one side and end about there, and then you're going to start about here again and stitch there and up. So basically what we're doing is leaving about 5 inches open, and the reason for that is when we get close to the end, we're going to need something to be able to turn everything inside out, and that's where we'll be able to do that. So I'm just going to start stitching this, and we'll start on this end. Just make sure all your edges are together, everything is straight and even. And I'm just going to start along one side here. And then when I turn my corner here, I'm going to go back one stitch, it was a little too close to the end there. When I turn my corner here, I'm going to stitch, about 1/3 of the way up. And I'm going to do a little back stitch to secure it. Bring my needle up, cut my thread, and then I'm going to start again. Oops, just make sure it's all nice and neat here. Then I'm going to start again, leaving about a 5-inch gap between the two. And again, I'm going to do just a little bit of a backspace here because that's the portion we're going to be turning inside out, and so I just want to make sure it's got a little extra support there. and then again all the way up this entire side. Okay, so I've put my insert or my inside fabric to the side. Now we're going to move on to sewing our handles together. And if you remember, we had folded these in half and in half again, and then pressed on our thin strip of interfacing towards the center of the fold, and then just folded it all back together again. And what we want to do at this point is just top stitch down one end first, and I like to do the open end first because I like to make sure that gets nice and secure. And then you can turn it around and stitch along the folded side. So again, we're just top stitching, and top stitching means we're going to stay pretty close to the edge, not quite a 1/4 inch. And then once those two are stitched, I'm going to show you here with this one, then we're going to stitch all the way down the middle. And so we've got 3 lines going through our handle here. And I'm just going to start here so you can see the top stitch. So I'm going to put my first strap in, and again, I'm not going all the way to the 1/4 inch over here. I'm just going to the edge of my fabric. And then I can just start stitching. And you can, again, pin this. I would recommend going kind of slowly when you do this because sometimes it has the tendency to kind of pucker and buckle because the top layer might feed faster than the bottom layer, or vice versa actually. So we're just going to stitch all the way across, and then when we finish that one side, we're going to flip it over, stitch along the other edge, and then once more down the center. Now that we have all of our individual pieces sewn together, we're going to start to assemble the bag. And what I'm going to do is take my outer portion of the bag, so this was my main fabric, and if you remember a few minutes ago I told you to turn this right sides out. Well, I forgot about this step, so this needs to be turned back inside out again, and we are going to work from here. So what I want to do from the top of my fabric is measure in 5 inches. I'm just going to make a mark here. And then I'm going to do the same thing from the other end, 5 inches. And then I'm going to place a pin right on that line. And do it again over here. What I want to do now is pin in my handles. So what I'm going to do is I actually want them sewn on from the inside. So I have my pins down here, and I'm going to use those pins to align my handles. So I'm going to insert the handle in there, and I'm going to put my handle on the outside of the pin. That's where I'm going to butt it up. And you can do the outside or the inside, however you'd like to do that, but just make sure you do it the same way on all 4 of them because we want these to line up. So now once that's there, I'm going to pin it in place and do the same thing with the other side. But what I want to make sure is that my handle isn't twisted when I do this. So make sure you untwist that and butt those raw edges up again and pin. And now I'm going to baste these on. And basting just means I'm going to stitch them on, but I'm going to use a wide stitch length. So the reason being, these are going to be stitched on later when we stitch all the way across this seam, so they'll be secured at that time. Right now we just want to get them tacked in place so we can move on to the next part. And when you baste, then it's enough to hold it together, but it's also really easy to pull it out when you need to pull it out. So now I'm going to go ahead and start my stitching. And I'm just going to go right across where the handle is. 1/4 inch down, up to the pin here. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this end. 1/4 inch down, to the end here. Okay. And now I'm going to do the exact same thing to this other side. So I'll have both my handles in there. Okay, I have both of my handles basted on, and what we're going to do next is make a box bottom for the bag. So I'm going to take one of the corners, and what I want to do is kind of make a triangle out of this. So I'm going to fold it in the corner, and you've got a seam on both sides here, so you can kind of feel it with your finger. Just make sure those are aligned, okay? And it's all pulled out. And then I'm going to measure down 1.5 inches from the top of my triangle here. There we go. And I'm just going to place a little line there. And what I want to do now is draw the line all the way across. And you know you've done it right if from edge to edge, it measures 3 inches, which mine does. So I'm just going to draw a line all the way across, okay? And then what we're going to do is stitch along this line and then trim. So I'm going to go back to my machine here, and if you still have it on the baste stitch, remember at this point you just want your regular stitch length, because this is one we want to hold. So I'm just going to stitch right on the line itself. Okay, and then it's going to look something like this. And what I want to do now is trim about 1/4 inch up, and you can take this to your rotary mat and do an exact 1/4 inch, but I just kind of eyeball it. It's just such a small piece that I kind of eyeball and do 1/4 inch and just cut across. Okay, so that's what you're going to end up with. And then we want to do the same thing over on this side. So again, okay, so I'm going to measure down 1.5 inches and just make a little mark there. And then I'm going to go all the way across with a straight line. And I know I did it right if from edge to edge I have 3 inches. And again, I'm going to go ahead and sew that. And trim off. So what you're going to find now is when you open up the inside, you are going to have a box bottom. And I'll get this opened up and show you what that looks like in a second. All right, now we're going to start putting everything together. And this is the part where you're probably going to think, oh, what is Daniela doing? This doesn't make sense. But I promise it's going to come together. Just bear with me for a few minutes here. And if you've already made a bag like this before, you know what I'm talking about. So we're going to take the outer portion of our bag, right sides out, and place it inside the inner portion of our bag, and this is still turned inside out. So we want this outside matching this outside, so both our right sides are together. And what we want to do is match up our raw edges. So I want to match up the top of my outer portion that hasn't been stitched with the inner portion, again, which hasn't been stitched. And I'm just going to line all this up and pin it together. What you want to make sure here is at the seams, the side seams, just make sure you start with those and line those up. And I'm going to pin there. And get this end, same thing. I want to make sure those are lined up because then that'll help keep everything else where it's supposed to be. Okay, now what you also want to make sure is with your straps here, you want them inside here, but you also want to make sure that they're down far enough that when you're stitching this together, they're not going to get caught. You want them caught here on the raw edge. That has to get sewn together, but I don't want any other portion of that handle to be caught within that top part. So this is all going to be pinned together, and then you can just start sewing. And you're going to sew all the way around the perimeter of the bag. Okay, so I'm just going to start like this. Again, I'm just kind of paying attention to where my handles are. I want to make sure that those don't get caught in the stitching, and I'm going to sew all the way across the top of both of these. Okay, so I have stitched all the way around the top of the bag, securing the inner lining with the outside of the bag, along with those handles. Those are in there as well. And now for the fun magic part. This is where we're going to turn everything inside out. So remember, we left that 5 inches at the bottom open so that we could pull everything out. So I'm just going to reach in and start pulling out everything that is inside. So now you're going to see the outer portion of the bag and the handles. And okay, here we go. So basically I have, this is my inside and this is my outside. What I want to do is push the inside back in here, but I'm not going to push it all the way down to where that seam is. You're going to be able to feel around where your 2 inches of interface is that you had put on this earlier. So just kind of straighten the bag out a little bit and make sure you have that 2 inches, because that is what is your border for the bag. And what I'm going to do now is go ahead and just press this down so we get a nice crisp crease on it. And just the top part there, that's all I'm going to be pressing here. Just to make sure it all stays where I want it to be. And kind of feel around for that 2 inches of fusible web. You can feel that top, so you kind of know where to fold, where to turn your fabric. Okay, so at this point then, I mean, you can see it now, right? So just a few more steps to kind of finish it up, and then we'll be done. So I'm going to move on to securing the straps. All right, so to secure the straps, what we're going to do is stitch the strap. So I have this portion that's loose. I want to stitch that to the border to give it a little bit of extra strength. And to do that, I'm just going to put a pin in this to keep it straight and together while I do this, okay? I'm just going to go ahead and do a square all the way around there, and then do that on all 4 sides. So I'll show you the first one here. And you're going to have to maneuver the bag a little bit as you do this. And I'm just doing kind of a top stitch here, maybe a little bit wider than a top stitch. And I'm going to get to my first corner and turn and just keep doing that. And you can see it's pretty easy. The bag's not huge, so it's easy to get it moved around your machine. And if you wanted even more stability for this, depending on how you're going to use the bag, you could even put an X through the center of your square here that you're stitching. I'm just going to secure my stitch here. Okay, so if you wanted to, you can just do an X like this as well, and that gives it added stability. But I think for the way I'll be using the bag, I think this is just fine. And do that same thing to all of the straps. And you know, I just want to mention I've got a lot of threads hanging out all over the place. Make sure to clip your threads as you go. And then when you're finished with the entire project, take a look at everything and see if you have any threads hanging, because nothing's going to make it look more unprofessional than having threads all over the place. So we're just going to clean that up a little bit. And then we are going to move on to the next step. Now that I have all 4 of my handles secured, what I want to do is one more stitch across the top just to secure the lining down against itself right along that top where the interfacing is. So I'm just going to start in the center here, and again the top stitch is just really close to the top of the item, and all it does is secure things in place, and it makes it look a little bit nicer. Oops. And just kind of keep an eye out for those straps, because you don't want to I think I'm going to have a problem here. You don't want to sew over the strap. You know, if I have an extra portion of it here, yeah, I'm going to sew over it here where I did my square, but that's the only part of the strap I want to sew over. Otherwise, you're going to be picking it apart, and that is never any fun. Believe me, I speak from much experience. My seam ripper is always by me. I'm just going to keep turning here, keep watching where my handles are. And so this also kind of strengthens those handles a little bit more too, just with that extra stitch. Almost there. And if you pressed it well enough, you won't need to pin for this part because it's all together anyway. And remember to do a little back stitch here. Okay, so that portion is done, and there's one more piece. Remember the 5 inches that we left open? It's inside the bag now. So what I'm going to do is pull this lining out a little bit, and I'm going to stitch this together. And what you can do, it's a good idea to kind of press this a little bit, because mine, I don't know about yours, but mine got pretty wrinkled. So go ahead and press that down nicely, and then just go through and sew a line right through this. I'm going to do mine without pressing after I just told you to press. but we just want to make sure that's closed so you don't have anything falling through. And that is it. Stuff that back in there. And you have a completed tote bag. So you can take this to the grocery store with you or to the farmer's market and fill it up. Super easy to make, so you can make multiples of these. I find the easiest thing to do is to cut out a few of them at the same time, because with the cutting you really have to pay attention. You know, is it 11 by 18? Is it 15 by 18? What are the straps? How many do I need? What about the interfacing? So I just cut out enough for a few right off the bat, so I'm in that mind frame. And then I can just sew them together pretty quickly, just zoop, zoop, zoop through the machine, and you've got a few bags there. Great idea for gifts, with the holidays coming up soon, birthdays, so lots of different things you can do with this. Use it as a book bag, come to the library and check out some books. So that is the project. And okay, so I'd like to thank you for joining me today to make our tote bag. I hope you had fun making it. I know I certainly did. If you have any problems or you have any questions, then feel free to reach out to me either by email. You have my email address, or you can call the Salem Library. I'm here most days, and I'd be happy to help out any way I can. I'd like to encourage everyone to send me a picture of your completed tote bag. We'd like to be able to post those on our Facebook page just to kind of show others what our patrons are working on and some of the projects that are being completed. We will not use any names. We would just post the pictures themselves. So if you are willing to do so, then I would welcome that. That would be great. All that's left is to say that we will have more programs coming up, so keep an eye open for that, and I will see you at the next one. Bye-bye.